back-to-back XRP news all over the place. In fact, there's so much of it that I'm struggling to keep up, but there's one particular one that I wanted to talk about today, and that's to do with what Uphold said about XRP. Now, Uphold and we kind of have a love-hate relationship. I recognize the company in what they've done for XRP, the XRP ledger, and their backing of the token, even when everybody else turned their back on XRP. Uphold was here, bullish as heck, providing ways for people to trade, custody, whatever. At the same time, though, Uphold succumbed to the pressure from the government and closed my account just because I made a transaction, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Anyway, so they closed my account. I can't log in. Their customer services were rubbish, blah, blah, blah. That apart, they did release a report, which I'm going to link in the description if you're interested, talking about how XRP has moved from what used to be a speculative asset to what is now a very seasoned, mature, institutional grade token, which I agree with. They have it 100%. So basically, up until relatively recently, and even though it was already planned, up until recently, it did take its time getting there. XRP, like most of the altcoins, were just speculative tokens on the exchanges. Number go up, people put money, hope it goes up, they sell, etc. But now, XRP, on a worldwide basis, has moved into this sort of utility token, and not just utility token for the masses, but utility token especially for the institutions. And there are three categories that pulled XRP into that status. The first one, of course, is the ETFs. Now, the 3IQ ETF, 3IQ being backed by Ripple, that basically debuted in Toronto, Toronto Stock Exchange, has actually changed quite a lot of things, and it's making a lot of moves. It's almost as good as one happening in the United States. We're still waiting for the one in the United States to kick off, which is going to happen eventually. But, you know, this Toronto Stock Exchange one, especially because it's backed by Ripple, is making a lot of waves, and a lot of institutional investors are looking into getting into that one. Now, while I haven't actually looked at it myself, I'm just taking the word of what Uphold said in their report. And this has opened the floodgates into the ETFs when it comes to XRP. Again, the price will reflect it eventually. Things are still warming up, but it is what it is. The second thing, of course, is the tokenization of real world assets that's happening, you know, either by association with Ondo Finance or directly in the XRP ledger, as we've seen in Dubai and so parts of the Middle East. That, again, the institutions are perceiving the XRP ledger and the XRP as a utility blockchain and a utility token for tokenization of, you know, real estate, treasury assets and stuff like this, right? The third thing, which hasn't made as much in terms of waves, but will create the same wave like these two things that I've aforementioned, is regulated custody. So regulated custody, yes, the institutions have bought XRP. Where do they store that XRP? Okay. And now we're talking about Mateco as an example of a company that was acquired by Ripple as a strategic acquisition to dominate this field in Europe. But this is going to be a service that's going to be global, right? Because, of course, you can custody crypto anywhere you want. It doesn't have to be physically in one country. It's not like the dollar or the pound or whatever. This is cryptocurrencies, right? Now, the main competitor they have in that field is, of course, Coinbase with their custody services. A lot of government organizations, big organizations have picked Coinbase because Coinbase has been doing it for a while as well. But with Mateco, Ripple is going to bring the fight to Coinbase, and I believe that they're going to dominate that particular industry as well. So when that happens, people are going to realize that Mateco is not only custodying XRP per se, but also custodying Bitcoin, Ethereum. They're a generic digital currency custody engine, right? Not just XRP. So Ripple basically effectively will be providing custody services for other tokens. You know, people stashing away Bitcoin for the future, for their treasury, to hedge against inflation. These billion-dollar organizations and businesses, countries, etc., are going to be custodying in a regulated manner with Ripple, because Ripple, of course, is regulated. And all of this is going to benefit XRP because a lot of these cryptocurrencies that are being custodied will be facilitated on the XRP ledger as well. So XRP is going to serve as bridge currency, moving these tokens from one to the other, changing state from one to the other. If they're going to move it cross-border, chances are they're going to use XRP to move it cross-border rather than sending crypto on the Bitcoin blockchain or Ethereum blockchain and having to pay ridiculous fees. There's probably going to be some bridging happening into XRP and back out again, etc., etc., etc. So there's so many benefits. So because of these three main categories I've mentioned, let me mention them again: the regulated custody, the ETFs, and the tokenization of real-world assets. And we're going to see a lot more of these things. And again, there's been a turning point, according to Uphold, that we've moved into a new era for XRP, and I believe so. Anyway, you can see that I'm sweating a little bit. It's because today is the hottest day of the year so far. Temperatures reaching 31 degrees. And it's also the longest day of the year, summer solstice in the northern hemisphere. So shout out to those two events coinciding. People are not doing very well in this heat. In this country, obviously, we're not designed, or the country isn't designed to function that well anywhere over 25 to 30 degrees. Infrastructure starts to collapse. London Underground starts to get overwhelmed by how much it has to spend on air conditioning to even keep it at normal room temperature. And things like bridges sometimes have to be covered by foil because of the ancient architecture on some of them. Some of them have been fixed and revitalized, but some of the older vintage ones were built when I don't think the weather was ever thought to get this hot on a consistent basis. So shout out to that. And that's always quite interesting. Not financial advice, of course. Do your own research, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.